Thank you everyone for taking the time to join us for today's discussion. I know it's been a trying 2 years, I think, for everyone in the public sector and in the private sector, largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic and all the extended lockdowns. We are honored to host all of you today for this discussion, and we hope it will be a lively one. I believe Dr. Jayasundara highlighted many important issues in his keynote speech, and we may not have the time to cover all of them, but we hope to dig in as deep as we can in the time we do have. The theme of today's dialogue is a production-based economy. It is about digitalization and agricultural industrialization. So, I would like to kick things off with the common question to all of our panelists. Based on your respective experience and expertise, and from the perspective of the organizations that you're affiliated with, what do you think are the necessary preconditions required for Sri Lanka to launch its own industrial revolution into a production-based economy? And I'd actually like to start with Ms. Kanda. Perhaps you can help us kick things off by talking about the role of infrastructure in building a production-based economy.
Hello?
Ms. Kanda first. Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting. The Sri Lanka we're situated for a number of opportunities, and then I think the development of the infrastructure is definitely important, but then it's not only infrastructure in terms of hardware, the software, social capital, human capital that support that economy is quite important. So as the World Bank has been supporting both infrastructure side as well as the social sector or human capital and also systems development of the country. I think the government laid out the pathway to try to bring down the fiscal sustainability, debt sustainability over the years. And then that is a great direction to pursue. And in order for the Sri Lanka to really unlock its potential, and then especially the private sector's power for industry or other service sectors, I think it is important for the really private sector and private capital to come in. And for that one, the business environment, investment climate needs to be enhanced, as well as the shift in the infrastructure as the government already laid out, the shifting from the carbon-based energy to renewable energy to bring down the energy cost, as well as to make the digital technology much more available and affordable to the broader population, and the human capital to address the skills that are maybe like more missing and more needed more to support such a 21st economy. And then the World Bank has been supporting in the infrastructure, education sector, as well as the agricultural technology, climate smart technology. There are much more we can do together, and then to make the Sri Lanka to a pathway to a growth, and inclusive, greener, and resilient for the next century.
Right. On that note, on building human resource capacity, I'd actually like to move on to Mr. Chen. Could you talk a little bit about the role of technical and vocational training, especially because there is a lot of know-how that is needed to build up production capacity, and I think the ADB is involved a little bit in technical and vocational training.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, if I may start with my impression about the budget. I think the budget, of course, Dr. Jayasundara mentioned several keywords. So he mentioned about the commitment, the progress. For me, I think the message I got from the budget, first, it's actually a very sobering message, because it actually reviewed what has happened in the last 72 years and also clarified the current situation. The second message I get from the budget is actually it is a very encouraging budget. So Section 8 of the budget actually described the future direction. But to achieve this target, we need to do a lot. And the country will need a new generation of good talent to really achieve the growth in different sectors in a trade economy. And I think in this context, the TVET will play a very important role. The country has a very good TVET system since 1990s. The system was working well, but we gradually realized that there are some problems because the graduate from this TVET system cannot be matched very well with the job market. Clearly there is a mismatch, particularly in the manufacturing sector. Last year we published a study. We analyzed in depth two sectors. One is food and beverage, the other one is electronics and electricity. We cannot really find enough graduate which can be qualified for the job opening in the market. And move forward, how do we do that? I think the first thing is the TVET system need to have a real-time or actually continuous development of its curricula to match the curricula with the demand from the market. The second point is actually the new players should be more and more introduced in the TVET system, like the private sector. So the private sector, the business, they can provide a lot of internship and others. How this can be connected to the TVET system to have a smooth placement of the TVET graduate. The last point, which is not the least I want to suggest, is actually we also need to create a culture in the secondary education and probably also the tertiary education. What will be the requirement of the skills to find a job in the market? So in ADB last year we approved a secondary education program which is supporting the country to build the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics subject in the secondary education. We are doing the same thing in the tertiary education. We hope this will bring and actually catalyze some kind of culture change so that the young generation, they understand what will be required in the market and they are prepared. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Attygalle, I'd like to direct my next question to you. State capacity is also going to be very important as Sri Lanka embarks on this production journey. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges in building that state capacity, in attracting the talent and the human resources that can direct the whole development journey? What are the fiscal constraints and how do you hope to overcome them?
Before coming to that, I would like to briefly mention about the, it's an extension what Dr. Jayasundar mentioned, certain reforms embedded in this budget speech, which will answer some of your questions also. Now, what I see, there are about 4 areas where reforms have been articulated in the budget. One is the external sector. They are, from the exporters' point of view, I think the support given to the exporters, that is through certain, in a way, identify them, rating given to them, thereby easing their activities. Also, a budget mentions about the reforms in the regulations, that is basically the import-export regulations. There are about 1,700 items where, as at today, exporter and importer has to visit multiple agencies. There, it will be reduced. It will be the main agency and the customs only. So that's a big reform. What I see for the external sector or the exporters and importers. Also, there would be certain para-tariffs removed. About 400 line items will be removed. So these things are big reforms, what I see in the external side. In the fiscal side, I think Dr. Jayasundara mentioned the path that we want to go in, the path that we will take the country's budget deficit to around 4.5 by 2025, and then beyond that to a surplus budget. So then about that is the external, fiscal, then the production from the our trading economy to elevate to a production economy. The path and the reforms that we envisage there also, it's clearly mentioned in the budget. So basically, and also from the public sector side, the improvements in the procurements, because we talk about 1 billion public investment, but on the ground, it's only half happening. Why? Main issue is, what I see, is the procurement delays, right? So we have to have a procurement big reform in that sector, which we will undertake quickly. It's more in line with the World Bank ADB style, like procurement procedures, transparent but quicker. So those things will happen. I just want to add those to what Dr. Jayasundara mentioned. Then about the skill side. Skill side also, if you take, a great emphasis has been given in the vocational training, because now what we see about now with the increase, about 40,000 graduates coming. But normally, you know, the A levels, roughly about 250,000 pass. So only 40,000 goes into the university. So 200,000 left over. So there are also the skill development side, a great emphasis has been given now from the after the new government came in. A lot of activities have been identified. The city university concept has come in. So which will help to the dropouts to be employed. Also, we have to have now another issue is, now if you take, say, 25,000 people or the university graduates come out, sizable amount is not employable. So they are on the street asking for government jobs, right? So that also, I think we have to address. They are, I think, World Bank, ADB is supporting those, that is to have some schemes or some the contents where a graduate is employable. So those things are happening. And big investment has gone into higher education, vocational training, that type of thing. So from the government side, from the fiscal side, there's a lot of emphasis given to this human resource development.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Attygalle. Mr. Oshada Senanayake, as the head of ICTA, I'd like you to comment a little bit on your perspective on this budget, and particularly some of the comments we heard earlier about the role of technology in improving ease of doing business, improving the taxation regime. What are your thoughts on that?
Interesting question. And I think, as Dr. Jayasundara eloquently articulated, I think it's an imperative from a technology perspective that we have a very stable tax policy. In fact, I still continue to do the TRC role as well. So I'll explain how important this is. For the last 2 years, if you look at the telecommunications sector, which is not only now empowered in providing telephony services, we all know the concept of convergence. I believe the telecommunication infrastructure in the country will be the most pivotal infrastructure that's required on the vision of transforming Sri Lanka. If we cannot get the technology, or rather the communication piece right, I guess we'll be back at square one. Now, in that sense, I think the tax policy, a stable one at that, is absolutely important. For the last 2 years, from even a citizen perspective, let me go back to the government vision of a digital transformative Sri Lanka. It says a digitally inclusive Sri Lanka, empowered by a future digital economy and a smart society. Now, if you look at the digital inclusivity piece, the 3 key tenets is affordability, accessibility, as well as digital skills. Now, if you look at the affordability piece, just let's go back 3-4 years. As citizens, we've been paying a staggering tax amount. Now, that's not going to be conducive for ensuring adoption of this digital technology. Of course, the COVID has helped, at least if something good has to come out of the COVID pandemic, it's the forced digitalization. But today, if we look at the tax structures that has been evident across the last 2 years, it's been absolutely pragmatic. Today, the telecommunication industry is literally doubling up investments by the next year. We are letting go of archaic tax regimens such as the tower tax policies. These are impediments the way I believe. If you look at the current Government Sannivedana program, which is our own, very own universal service obligation project, which is also mandated by the International Telecommunication Union, I think it's imperative of enabling rural infrastructure with communication. But the governments has to play a role in that. Now that shouldn't be just typical coordination. It's got to be an incentive and empowerment of the industry. Now today, we are investing 50% from our telecom development levy towards rural connectivity development. Just on the budget, it's been accepted, the proposal by TRC to fiber connect all 10,250 schools in Sri Lanka. So I believe, going back to the tax regiment, a stable tax regiment is very important. It's absolutely necessary in terms of ensuring the affordability piece and accelerating and ensuring more investments come into play from the telco industry. Now I'll confirm how strong and successful this journey has been. Today, in the latest International Telecommunication Union report of Sri Lanka in terms of affordability, for the first time in history, Sri Lanka has broken into the top 20 in terms of affordability indices. Today, we are the 20th rank for the cheapest fixed broadband. 20th, right? It keeps getting better. For mobile broadband, we are on the 13th rank. And last but not least, for voice mobile services, we are on the 7th. Now, this is not local report stating this. This is the apex body of the International Telecommunication Union based on its latest report stating this. So I believe as we move along, the enablement of technology and the diffusion of technology are of paramount nature in terms of realizing this digitally transformed country. As Dr. Jayasundar said, that magical point of, zeroing the trade deficit, I believe there's a huge role to play for the ICT industry as well. I'm just coming off the forum, the Asia Pacific Telecommunicative Forum last week. The importance was put on ICT enablement is top priority for all governments. And I believe today, I think this tax regiment, which has been untouched this time around, I should be thankful so that the telecommunication industry, the ICT industry can go forward. Today we have a zero tax regiment on the ICT industry. And I believe it has to continue. We have new paradigms of local products coming in. We've been a traditionally technology service-oriented destination. But we believe to go to that $3 billion mark that Dr. Jayasundara mentioned by 2024, it's also imperative that we encourage and empower the local creation of intellectual property, local software. Today we have amazing products from Sri Lanka that's cutting across the global front in terms of being used by MNCs. And I believe the tax regiment, importantly, and the tax policies, it's an important aspect. We are talking about new paradigms coming of digital taxes. And I believe Sri Lanka has to maintain status quo, as mentioned by the OECD reports, to ensure we have a zero digital tax policy, which again, I think this budget has confirmed on. So I believe there are quite a few aspects we need to go on. As I mentioned, technology, I believe, I might go far as to say that it will be the key success factor in this digitally transformative vision moving forward. And I believe the ICT BPO industry as well as the telecommunications sector has a great responsibility in ensuring Sri Lanka realize this vision.
Thank you. Mr. Lalantha Watudura, I'd actually like you to chime in here and try and connect all these threads regarding infrastructure, human skills development, technology. You're from the private sector, you're a manufacturer. When we talk about the production economy, we're really talking about people like yourself. What's your reading of this budget, and do you think it provides the necessary preconditions to take manufacturing to the next level in Sri Lanka?
Thank you, Sharon. I represent here Sri Lankan apparel brands. I'll say like this: like, it's not about manufacturing. Now, have we ever recognized Sri Lanka as a design hub, as a fashion and lifestyle hub for our own talents? And that is exactly where our focus is. And Sri Lankan Apparel Brands Association represents approximately about $3 billion domestic business model, which definitely has potential to go to the global markets. And some of our members have already started the journey. And I think post-COVID economic landscape definitely let us have more room, more opportunities for us in the near future that we need to explore. Basically, Sri Lanka being an island, to bridge along with the tourism, the high-level tourists that we expect within the next couple of years. Sri Lanka also needs to be a fashion and lifestyle destination. And it should be like London, Paris, New York, and then Colombo. So we do have all the capabilities, and Sri Lanka has been credible over many decades, servicing international brands, and that in turn we can capitalize to take our national talents overseas, and we are in the process of doing that. And we have submitted a comprehensive proposal to the government, and I think this budget definitely would support us, and there are things that we are still discussing, like obviously we still have to depend on materials, heavily import based, right? So from fabric from A to Z, we don't have a textile manufacturing hub here. I mean, rather, that industry is not great in Sri Lanka yet. But if we import and then also integrate our product, open to sell fashion. Sri Lanka is obviously known for good apparel manufacturing hub, to service international brands. We have a $5.5 or $6 billion business, but this is the other side of the coin, which definitely has a lot of potential to grow. So that's, I think, is what Sri Lanka requires now. We could definitely add probably another $5 billion in, another 10 years' time, making Sri Lanka a fashion hub, fashion destination. That would also facilitate, take middle, advanced, economy, kind of living livelihood, that we've been always, wanting to create, especially taking care of the SME sector. And happy worker, we are not talking about creating new free zones, anything. It's going to the village. It's a cottage industry, and they get good 30-40% higher pay from us because we are not pressurized by someone else, on their particular SMV. So we have, I do hope that, the government has shown positive, I had an opportunity to meet Honorable Finance Minister, and obviously we will follow up with Dr. P.B. Jayasundar as well, time to come, and, we are quite positive, and we have, we look forward to, hopefully from next year onwards, exploring. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to change gears now a little bit. The current trend of industrial development tends to place a lot of emphasis on the climate and on sustainability. We've seen a lot of heated debate both internationally and locally about sustainable development, about curtailing carbon emissions and transitioning to renewable energy. This obviously poses a lot of unique challenges to a developing country like Sri Lanka, especially one that has very low per capita carbon emissions, but at the same time as an island is very vulnerable to climate change. Ms. Chiyo Kanda, I was wondering whether you could tell us a little bit about the financing options available for developing countries like Sri Lanka to attract investment and to transition into renewables.
Thank you for the question. It's the government of Sri Lanka, as you know, as we all know, that it's committed to really significantly change and transform and convert to a renewable energy up to 80% of the total generation. And for that one, you really require billions of investment over years. So for that one, for that purpose, you need basically all sorts of resources, public, private sector, international, multilateral, bilateral, as well as the private sectors. And especially private capital will be very important. The government could especially focus on, for instance, enhancing the grid, transmission, distribution, and also invest in things like the battery sources so that we can store the renewable energy. Also to try to create the environment and the regulatory and the investment climate for private capital to come in. The multilateral, but like us, World Bank, ADB, could help in finance some of them, and also provide a guarantee facility, for instance, for the private sector to come in. But also there are some resources available, like concessional resources, like climate investment fund, in the green climate funds, that could be made available for certain type of resources. But I think important one is to really have the wide mix of financing resources, especially leveraging the finite public and multilateral and concessional resources to bring in the private capitals in a major way.
Mr. Chen, would you like to add to that, specifically about the framework required to incentivize the private sector investment in renewable energy?
Thank you. So I think one observation I had in Sri Lanka is actually environmental sustainability is in the gene of Sri Lanka. So whenever you talk about environmental sustainability, actually you can actually get a lot of good understanding and support to ensure the sustainability, ensure the biodiversity, and ultimately also to this climate change commitment. So the commitment of Sri Lanka to achieve this carbon neutrality by 2050, and as part of it to achieve this 70% of renewable energy by 2030 is actually a nature choice of the country. So I do see actually there is a reason and a consensus within the country to achieve this target. But having said that, this target is actually still a quite ambitious target. The total installed capacity of the energy generation in the country is about 4,500 megawatts. Dr. Jayasundar mentioned in the next 2 years, you plan to increase another 2,000 megawatts of renewable energy. To achieve the target of 70% of renewable energy, ultimately we need to create another 4,500 of renewable energy capacity. So that means almost double the size of the energy generation, but with only the increase from the renewable energy. So you can imagine how challenging the target will be. But the country actually, I think, first is quite serious about this target. So we have to build the capacity in the transmission network so that the capacity can be able to absorb the future fluctuation of this renewable energy generation. At the same time, a policy framework will be required. First, the private sector, they need to get confidence. They need to see actually a stable revenue flow revenue projection they can actually get from the policy framework. They can estimate. Then accordingly, they will get confidence to invest in the renewable energy generation. I think this is one area still a lot of work need to be done to ensure the energy sector, the main players, including the CEB and also other players in the sector, need to work together to come up with a good policy solution. And finally, I think one point I want to make here is based on ADB's projection, by 2030, the total investment in the Asia region, Asia and the Pacific, in the renewable energy will reach the level of $1.3 trillion. And how much Sri Lanka can benefit from this $1.3 trillion market? Can Sri Lanka benefit it first from reaching this 70% of renewable energy goal? And secondly, actually also Sri Lanka can also earn some income or gain something from this 1.3 trillion market. I think that is one thing very interesting to think about, but very challenging to achieve. Probably I can add another final point. The energy transition is actually a complicated process. It will affect everyone's work and life. We need to ensure a just transition towards this target. And how to do that, I think a lot of details need to be worked out. ADB is working in several other countries like Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, try to create an energy transition mechanism. So if it's desirable, we can also try to share this knowledge we obtained in other countries to Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Mr. Senanayake, again, as the head of ICTA, can you talk a little bit about how the public sector and the private sector should work together to sort of provide the necessary data and know-how in this transition? I believe ICTA is already involved in some sustainability initiatives.
Yes. So I believe there's a huge role to play in terms of ensuring that we create an environment of the public-private partnerships on this front. So if you look at the digital transformation aspect again, creating the ease of doing business, for example, there are aspects of certain archaic procedures that we need to completely automate and at a quick turnaround at that. Now what we're looking at as the ICTA is to change our strategy from looking at building these solutions ourselves is to engage and enable the ICT industry to do this for us. Now it's a two-pronged strategy. One aspect is, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking at creating local software products going out into the world. So in this sense, when we involve the local ICT industry to create these products in Sri Lanka, we are creating a local reference, number one. Number two, we are creating a springboard within our own backyard that they can mature their products, which will ensure that they can take this towards the world. And number three, we don't have to reinvent the core competencies, the engineering rigor that is out there on our ICT industry. Today, you know, our ICT industry is literally servicing MNCs. We are considered as a fantastic destination for technological services. It's been identified by multiple reports. So for us, moving forward, it's about enabling the industry and ensuring the industry walks on this journey with us. We are not going to compete with the industry anymore. Number two, again, as you would know, when we go on this accelerated journey, the infrastructure piece is very important. I talked about the communication infrastructure earlier, but let's talk about even the cloud infrastructure that's required. More and more countries are going on a cloud-first strategy. So we need to also adopt these best practices. So today we are also looking at completely changing our approach of how we look at the government cloud. We are looking at how we can leverage on the industries and what they have to offer in terms of leveraging on this best practice. Today we have fantastic tier 3 data centers in Sri Lanka. We can proudly talk about a very strong submarine cable ecosystem that cuts across from even direct landings that we have. So why not utilize this infrastructure? And also by providing this opportunity for the industry, we are providing them a point to accelerate their investments as well. So for us, one aspect is enabling and engaging with the industry. Number two, we also understand the capacity planning requirement. So as we go along this journey of enabling the public sector and key services with technology, we have to look at a sustainable environment that we have to create. I think governance is of paramount nature. Today, as a country, I don't think the issue is technology. It's about creating that strong governance-based environment as we go along using these systems. We're talking about the Data Protection Act coming along. I think it's going to come out, the first draft is going to be approved this week in itself. We have already got the approval to go forward on the Cyber Security Act as we go along. It's going to enable us to create a cybersecurity agency. As much as we embrace digital, we have to ensure the cyber readiness of our country. So I think the focus is on a much more holistic aspect this time around, not just focusing on technicalities and technology only. So for us, when we go along, enablement of core competencies on the public sector in terms of technology is also very important. Just last month, we've launched our own CDIO program, Chief Digital Information Officer program, which is open to all the public sector employees. So if people want to basically adapt and engage on this future of becoming a digital information officer, because what we believe is as ICTA, we will handhold and guide this digital transformation journey. But at the end of the day, these sectors has to be empowered to take ownership of their own digital transformation. Today we are looking at the education sector. Again, a fantastic example, because today the education sector is enabled by a local homegrown learning management system that is completely developed by the Education Ministry as well as with the support of ICTA and as well as with pro bono support from the industry. So it's a fantastic example to answer a question of a fantastic example of private-public partnership. Today, the same platform is utilized by children, parents who are moved on to a tendency of homeschooling today, and even teachers. With the help of the telecommunication industry, we've been able to completely make free of charge access to these platforms for all of the state schools. As of today, there are 6 million hits per day on the Attygalle platform. I mean, this just within a year, from April 2020. And we have not stopped over there. We've gone one step ahead and ensured the Learn e-learning platform of all state universities are accessible free of charge today. So I think when we talk about this new concept of digital divide, we have to address it. The inclusivity has to be addressed. And these are examples of how we are looking at the public-private partnerships in ensuring we do that. If you look at the health sector today, we are working with the German Debt to Health project in terms of setting up a long-term blueprint of digital transformation. So it doesn't matter whether I'm heading ICTA or whether the structures are going to change in the future. We will have a long-term plan that is set in stone. And that's going to go, irrespective of whether policies change or whatever. That digital transformation vision for that particular sector is well set. And we are working with the likes of, again, ITU, which has defined a lot of ICT-driven policies, which has been adopted by other countries. So why reinvent the wheel? UK today has a cloud-first strategy, which we are following. The CDIO model that I mentioned, we are following, again, the UK Gov Digital Initiative. So there's a lot of learnings we can derive. And interestingly, as Sri Lanka, I think we can get all of these positives and leverage better, as I believe so. So this is the journey we are taking. For us, building core competencies is important. Capacity building is absolutely important. We are working with the university structure. We are working with international agencies such as the Gates Foundation in terms of bringing in that best of the breed knowledge into our journey of digital transformation. We're talking about the digital ID project that's about to be launched. Again, absolute open concept where we are working with international parties. The Data Protection Act today that we speak is in line with the GDPR of the European front. So I think these are going to be key aspects that's going to ensure that we have the basic imperatives in place as we look at leapfrogging on top of technology as a country.
Right, thank you. Mr. Watudura, again, climate change is often portrayed as a crisis. But for business, for the private sector, crisis also comes with opportunity. And Mr. Chen hinted a little bit about the size of the market size of renewable energy. Could you talk about how Sri Lankan manufacturers should position themselves in this sort of new era where there is this focus on sustainability, business ethics, on eco-friendly practices. How can Sri Lanka position its products and its goods in this era?
Obviously, we need to look at, we need to compare Sri Lanka with countries like Thailand and Vietnam. Look at their domestic business model in terms of fashion, apparel, and accessories. And the potential we have to take Sri Lanka to that level, it's definitely not far. It's just with the industry knowledge. Most of Sri Lankan brand owners are also exporters, basically for international apparel brands, like I said earlier. So especially if you look at a market like India, where synthetic fabric is weak, Indian market, synthetic fabric manufacturing is weaker. So we can capitalize on the opportunity. If you look at the foreign exchange between the two countries, right? So we don't have to go that far. And then the Middle East market, the Europe, right? If you leave aside US. So definitely, starting from our design talents from various private design schools we have had in the country. And for you to basically capitalize on this opportunity, obviously, we would definitely need government to recognize the value of the homegrown talents, and along with the EDB. And we need to create trade shows, March and October twice a year, typically like spring, summer in March, and, autumn, winter in October in Colombo, and build that hype, build that vibe. And then we have not done that. We have been servicing international brands all these times, and we have kind of neglected the national talents, the brands. And today, the domestic brands are basically they are located from one Golf Face mall to many other department stores. And the walk-in tourists and the business tourists and the regional retailers definitely could be attracted. And also the B2C opportunities. E-commerce is huge. It has good 20-30% growth after the pandemic. And then, we can start definitely, B2C platform, and also we're looking at a wholesale hub somewhere in Negombo. So it's like one side you create like a mini garment factory model, which we have proposed, like 25 machine factory model in rural areas in Sri Lanka, which we can support with a buyback agreement, right? So we go to them with the orders, right? So we integrate them. We are actually working currently with the state ministry as well, batik and handloom, ready-made garment industry, ministry. So we are very positive, and we are very excited to see, the opportunities we can create to bring in foreign revenue, by basically exposing our homegrown talents in brand. So we definitely see potential. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, I'd like to open up to questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand and someone will come with a mic. I think now would be a great time to take advantage of the fact that we have Dr. P.B. Jayasundara and S.R. Attygalle especially with us to answer any pressing questions about the budget.
Thank you. My name is Melanie Kanaka. I'm from the World Bank. I have a question for you, Dr. Jayasundara. We see many Sri Lankans, when they go overseas, they really flourish and they cherish in their professional careers. My question to you, sir, today is what benefits or what options are we giving our talented Sri Lankans so that they may remain in this country and serve us rather than looking for greener pastures outside? Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. No, in fact, I try to refer to in my speech as well for the vast amount of Sri Lankan talent and business community living outside Sri Lanka. Importance of getting them back. Now, some of the reasons that they have gone are multifaceted, and for them to revert back also involve multifaceted consideration. One is education and health requirements that some of their families are looking at, and kind of a enabling environment they need. Second thing is their facilities that would require when they come back, like acquiring housing, vehicles, and banking facilities, and also transacting their foreign earnings, whether the money remitted to the country is permitted to take back, kind of issues, whether they can have a second home here without having exorbitant taxes involved, whether they can have a vehicle that they can be brought in, kind of thing. So in the kind of reform that the minister has referred to, our attempt is not only the conventional sense, bringing foreign direct investment here, but also to bring the diaspora, bring Sri Lanka living overseas. Over 1 million Sri Lankans are living overseas. Some of the Sri Lankans are working outside and creating their doing business cheaper here, like techno parks, agro parks. Those are referred to in the budgets, and this Finance Act that I referred to will be basically providing that kind of enabling environment. We also need to recognize that the kind of reforms that they are looking at are much more conducive to the facilities available elsewhere. But for them to select this place, the educational reform, the mindset change, public service bureaucracy, and then going from pillar to post that Mr. Attygalle referred to. And in fact, many examples we have come across during this period where most of the Sri Lankans are looking at assisting the country in its new growth path that the President has outlined. So that is why we are looking at critical components like taxation, investment entry, outdoor facilities, stock markets, and the new technology, digital economy and digital governance structure, simple procurement systems, and also more stable environment here. And that's where, though some people may not understand the relevance of it, the getting the budget, getting the state enterprises much more active, and getting the national economy on a much more diversified basis are the ones that we are working throughout, and also to a certain extent even to see crimes. So they like to see much more stable, peaceful living here. Holidays, they are elderly parents, probably for retirement, enjoyment here and facilities like that, shopping, whole lot of gamut of things that even this our private sector is talking about. So, because their children don't know Sri Lanka, in fact, these parents are keen that they will get to Sri Lanka to create these opportunities here. So even the budget announcement, where schools in each opening international schools in opening every province and districts, and then the skills education being made available for them to hire certain peoples that they required. And it's a comprehensive one, and critical one is visa regulations, which is another one, airport logistics, custom logistics. So many of these things recognize. In fact, there is a specific paragraph in the budget, in the conclusion, referring to Sri Lankans go out for education, Sri Lankan go out for health care, Sri Lankan go out for professional jobs, and all over now, many Sri Lankan go out for doing business. In fact, some of these things. And our approach is also to get them back, get them involved and incentivize them, and getting them here involved, huge changes in the system. That's why we are creating much more private sector, startup type of activities. Even if you see our registration process, registration create lot of confusion between company registration, the board of investment, the tourism, and banks. So we have to realize they are living in a much more advanced environment, though they are Sri Lankan. So we have to create that enabling environment here to see that the attraction will be made.
Thank you, Dr. PP. I believe, unfortunately, we just have time for one more question from the audience.
Good morning. My name's Amanda Jewell. I'm from the Australian High Commission here in Colombo. I just want to thank the panel very much for the insights that you've given us today on the budget. My particular question relates to skills here in Sri Lanka. As you know, Australia and Sri Lanka have a very long and positive history in the education sector. And today that has led into, we have quite a few vocational linkages between Australian and Sri Lankan institutes. And we have quite a strong program of assistance for skills development in the tourism sector. I think in doing this, we're happy working with Sri Lanka to develop the skills of Sri Lankans, both for their employment to meet the jobs needs here in Sri Lanka, but also for those opportunities to work overseas. My particular question today is around, Australia is certainly assisting by offering Australian qualifications here in Sri Lanka, but there are many other institutions from many other countries that are doing the same thing. So my particular question is around developing Sri Lanka as a knowledge hub and the possibilities that the panel may see for Sri Lanka to become an internationally recognized education hub. Thank you.
I think in the budget also, it has been identified while thanking the Australian support for the education improvements in the country. In the budget, there are the private investment side, that is for the schools and also for the hospitals also, but you mentioned about the schools. So that is identified and it's open for the private sector to come and invest, right? Definitely there would be incentives earmarked for those particular investments. So government is keen, while from the public investment side, we have been investing a big amount. Even this year also, we have augmented a sizable amount. That is for the education side. So, and we are asking the private sector also, because certain as Dr. Jayasundara mentioned, now these the Sri Lankans who are living outside, they would like to see a better school, a school that what they think which is equal to what they are enjoying at the moment. So to develop that side also, definitely in the budget, Honorable Minister has mentioned about the private schools, the investment in the private school side. So it's open, even the Australians can't come and invest here.
Just to supplement, I'm aware that there is a quite close partnership with so many Australian academic institutions and universities with Sri Lanka. In the total education reforms that His Excellency has prioritized in his development plan, recognize creating opportunities for Sri Lankan. His fundamental question is many Sri Lankan young children look for, and this is a nation hungry for education. Throughout our culture, we are a nation, even from the poor families, looking for their children's education. So children who are going out from Sri Lanka, not just advanced countries like Australia, but even some other countries, are going because of their hunger for education, because for hunger for skills, hunger for developing entrepreneurship, hunger for becoming much more self-made personalities. And the government is encouraging our universities to partner therefore with most of universities in Australia in diverse fields. And similarly, it is very important university education alone in selected limited field will not create the skills that the world is looking for. And therefore, there is a great emphasis at the next level, tertiary education, where skills are being developed in much more diversified areas, not just this technical education per se, but even the skills required for agriculture, dairy, fisheries, and IT, mechanics, those sort of activities are also not sufficiently available, because when you look at the numbers here, there are about 300,000 children each year, 300,000 children each year sit for university entrance examination. Absorption capacity of the official government universities is around 30,000. You may increase even to, let's say, 35,000, 40,000. Now, that's also in quite a limited fields like medicine, engineering, now a little bit of IT and conventional programs, and quite a number also enter into liberal arts. Now the President's message and the task force work on the education was to shift this and to have much more diversified, much more market-oriented, much more global-oriented skills development. And having taken the number, let's say from 300,000, if you take 40,000 out per year, 200,000 children are looking for next level education in skills, and that's where this new Ministry of Skills Development have been created, and a great emphasis has been given to develop wide range of skills. And then the language skills and sports and recreations and extracurricular activities, and shifting children from much more exam-centric to other activities, and bringing much more new school benchmarks through international schools taking to district, because in Colombo and few cities enjoy a fairly reputed international schools, but none of them have gone to the villages. So if we are going to create an inclusive educational hub, such facilities has to be available in all 25 districts in the country. So that's the reforms we are working. And we are working very closely with Australia, and quite a large number of Australian academic institutions functions here, and the new opportunities, incentives which we have created will certainly build this ambition.
Can I quickly come in?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. I know time is up, but if I can quickly come in. The one thing that I really wanted to say here is yes, skills is very important, and we need, as I said earlier, we need to have and develop the right skills. But one thing, human capital is one of the biggest assets that Sri Lanka has. But one important untapped, undertapped resource is women. As you all know, the women's labor participation rate is quite low compared to the peers in the region and globally, and only like 32.5% compared to the around 75% for men. So if Sri Lanka was to really maximize its potential in human resources, then we really need to tap into this educated female who can really contribute to the economic growth. And especially in the rapidly aging society, that's really important. So but for that one, I think there's some changes in the legislation, regulations, and also there's some support system for things like child care and elderly care. But I think that's really going forward for the next, the generation. I think it's very important to focus. As a only person in this panel, in this gender, I thought I should say that. Thank you.
Can I add up one more thing from a technology perspective on that front? I think today the ICTA workforce in Sri Lanka is approximately 150,000. So as Dr. Jayasundara mentioned, for us to go at the $3 billion mark, which is today at about approximately $1.8 billion as ICT exports, it's imperative that we scale up our human capital to 300,000. So I think, ma'am, there's a huge opportunity in terms of creating that the tech education in Sri Lanka, where we are looking at today, the demand exceeds the supply by 2 times over for ICT workforces. Because today we are talking about not only exports of services, but also enabling core competencies in terms of the local digital transformation. So I believe that's a huge opportunity in terms of Australia in this case, looking at that education, tech education sector from a university investment perspective.
Yeah, if I may, just very quickly, 2 points. First, allow me to echo Chiyo's point on this woman. I think last year in the pandemic, we see the youth unemployment was high, and the women actually, I mean, the girls actually suffered more than the boys. But also one point I want to add here, I think question is about Sri Lanka become an international training hub. So we shouldn't ignore actually Sri Lanka is probably one of the most desirable place in South Asia. And South Asia is a region with actually much higher young population than many parts of the world. And this is a region actually growing very fast. And if the whole region is to grow from this lower middle income or this upper to the upper middle income country, just imagine how much job opportunity will be unleashed and how much demand will be there. I do see actually Sri Lanka has a comparative advantage to become international training center. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, that's all the time we have for questions. A big thank you to all our panelists for being with us today and for sharing their thoughts. And for the guests as well, we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.